Welcome back. Well, Mayor Ford's executive committee set to debate a proposal that could double development fees in this city. And joining us with more on this story, Steve Deveaux, Vice Chairman of the Building Industry and Land Development Association. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Thanks for having me.
Obviously, you are opposed to this. You have some concerns. What are they?
Very concerned. When we look at the slowdown that happened in the market in the global crisis in 2009, it was about consumer confidence. People didn't know what was happening in the world. The slowdown that we're seeing in this sector today is about affordability. Affordability is a huge issue. We've seen significant reductions in our sales year over year. In 2012, it was 40% less high-rise sales in the city of Toronto as compared to 2011. The first quarter of this year, we've seen a significant reduction in sales over the previous quarter, and it comes down to affordability.
And now, when you're talking about affordability, what about the average home buyer? I mean, is this something that eventually is going to trickle down to them if these fees are doubled?
So that's what happens. There's a misconception out there that I think when you look at the cranes that we've erected in the last number of years, that they're the result of the strength of a market today, but it's actually not the case. Those homes have been sold for 1, 2, or 3 years. But there's still a potential that those home buyers that purchased those condo units in the last 2 and 3 years are going to get hit with this increase. If the bylaw comes into effect in November or in January, we pass those costs on to the purchaser. And if they can't afford it at the end of the day, then we have a real problem.
Now, we actually had Councillor Shelley Carroll on the show. Some councillors obviously in favor of doubling these fees, saying that even by doubling them, that still puts us below what other municipalities are paying.
Right, and we often hear that. BILD commissioned a report, the Altus report, that looked at comparable governmental costs depending on where you're building. Oakville, Markham, Brampton, Toronto. Because you can't just look at development charges. There are a lot of other governmental costs that go into the production of unit. HST, land transfer tax, 2 land transfer taxes in Toronto, Section 37 parklands. And what we found is that when you look at all of the government costs that go into the production of a unit, it's not a deal to do business in the City of Toronto. It's about 17% of the total cost of a unit in the City of Toronto is governmental cost, whereas in Markham and Oakville, it's about 20%. So that's not a really, really big delta.
So do you think this will hinder development in the city?
Absolutely. We're very, very concerned about it. And what we've been saying to our partners at the city is that if there's a considerable slowdown in the growth of the condominium sector, it has a trickle-down effect on other important sectors of the city. We've seen 4.7 million square feet of office space built in the City of Toronto since 2009, a direct result of the labor force moving downtown. So if we stop building those units, or if the folks that now can only get a 25-year amortization on a mortgage versus 35 years, 4 or 5 years ago, if they can no longer buy those units, we don't build the units, they don't get the development charge, they don't get the long-term assessment that is generated after we build that product, and there's a risk that you don't get the office growth either.
And now we're almost out of time. I just want to ask you, what do you want to see happen?
We'd like to have the city sit down with us and say, what is an appropriate level of the expected cost over the next 10 years that should be borne by the development sector and by the future homeowners of the City of Toronto, and how much should be absorbed by the existing tax base, because the infrastructure projects that they're planning on are not just going to benefit the future home buyers over the next 10 years. There's a considerable amount of money in the development charge planned to build out the waterfront Toronto and Portlands. That certainly isn't going to be just enjoyed by the purchasers of the next 10 years. So we want a fair number, and we also want it phased in over a period of time that it doesn't have such a dramatic impact on our ability to deliver affordable product.
Well, we're obviously going to be watching this story very closely. Arguments on both sides, and it's going before the committee next week. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Thanks for having me.
Right now it's 3:53, 30 degrees. This is Toronto's breaking news at CB24. Well, a vigil continues this morning outside the hospital in South Africa. That's where Nelson Mandela has been